Thank you for joining us for today's event, the Ohara Ikebana Floral Demonstration with Jose Salcedo and the Ikebana International New York Chapter. I'm Latoya Strong. I'm the Director of Continuing Education here at the New York Botanical Garden. As we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that the New York Botanical Garden is located in the ancestral homeland of the Lenape Delaware people. We honor them and acknowledge their displacement, dispossession, and continued presence. Before we begin today's program, I'd like to highlight a few upcoming events that I think this crowd would in particular be interested in. On April 19th, floral designers Ace Berry and Kanan Marshall, who are both contestants on HBO's Full Bloom, will be joining us here in Ross Hall for a floral face-off, followed by a master class. On June 12th, Frances Palmer will discuss her latest book, Life with Flowers, in the Mertz Library. Following that talk, Frances Palmer will also be giving a master class. Now I'll turn our attention back to today's event. I'd like to introduce Roxanne Wasserman, the president of Ikebana International New York Chapter. So please join me in welcoming Roxanne.
Thank you, Latoya. Good morning. New York Ikebana International is proud to have partnered with New York Botanical Gardens over the last 3 years. This is our third Ikebana program. Ikebana is the art of Japanese flower arranging, an art in which concentration and selection persuade flowers to transcend themselves, to reveal their identity. The talent for transforming and idealizing the Japanese touch is in the heart of Ikebana. Ikebana International New York, chapter number 7, was founded in 1957. We are one of 138 chapters in 44 countries, with membership of almost 7,000 persons. It is with great pleasure that we have with us today our longest term II New York member with over 60 years of dedicated service, who is still teaching today and is celebrating her 100th year. Hata Sensei. Thank you, Mrs. Hata. In 1956, it was Mrs. Ellen Gordon Allen, who lived in Japan at the time and the wife of an American general, who founded Ikebana International in Tokyo, in a worldwide nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion and appreciation of Ikebana. Our motto, in friendship through flowers, expresses our aim to foster international amity through the study of Ikebana. Ikebana International does not teach or endorse any single type of Ikebana. Rather, it is an association that encourages many different schools. Ikenobo, Ohara, which we'll be enjoying today, and Sugetsu are the prominent 3 schools. Did you know that in Japan, there are over 3,000 registered Ikebana schools? Mm-hmm. Over last autumn, in 2024, the founding of Ikebana International. After the founding of Ikebana International, Ikebana, the word Ikebana, was registered by the Japanese Government Agency for Cultural Affairs as an intangible cultural property. With this designation, we hope that it will be a trigger for further progress in our activities and transmission of Ikebana to future generations. The transmission of our practices, our expressions, our knowledge and skills that the Ikebana community recognizes as part of our cultural heritage. We hope that those that were transmitted through generations will continue to be transmitted through generations and constantly recreated in response to our environment, our interaction with nature, and history. Now I would like to turn the program over to our II New York Program Chair, Debbie Kopinski, who is responsible for so many of the details that went into putting this program together. So, Debbie?
Hi, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be able to introduce Jose Salcedo to you today. He was raised in Los Angeles. He has an MS in computer engineering, and he worked as a software engineer at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena. And then why is he here today? You would like to know. I will let him tell you that. I'm not going to, because he tells it really much better than I can, and with such delight. He has served, of course, on the boards of the Ikenobo Society in Los Angeles and the Los Angeles Ohara chapter of Ikebana. And he's been a member of the Teachers Association there for over 30 years. And like all Ikebana enthusiasts, he is always learning new techniques and gaining inspiration from others. He still goes to classes, he teaches classes. It's truly never-ending learning and creativity. He's also participated, of course, in numerous exhibitions and demonstrations. And he also gave a demonstration at the Ohara at the North and Central American Regional Conference of Ikebana International in Dallas, Texas in 2019. And at that time, Roxanne Wasserman and I were in attendance, and we were just terribly impressed with his demonstration and his very congenial manner and great style. And so we cooked up this idea to invite him here today. And it's actually worked, and here he is. And I'm delighted to present Jose Salcedo.
Thank you. Just to make sure you guys can hear me? Okay. So before I get started, Debbie says I will introduce myself. Yes, I was a software engineer at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. I worked there for many years. I was a senior software engineer working on 70-meter antennas. I have degrees in computer engineering and physics with math minor. Basically, I was a nerd. Still am a nerd. And then one day, I happened to see a demonstration. An Ikebana demonstration. I had never heard of it. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what school. I didn't know there were schools. And it happened to be an Ikenobo demonstration. And before the demonstration, they had already made, one of the demonstrators had made a Rika arrangement. I had never seen it. I didn't know what it was. But to this day, I remember standing in front of it. And the first thought in my head was, I need to learn to do that. I don't know what that is, but I need to learn to create something that gives a person viewing it the same reaction I was having. And so after the demonstration, I went to go talk to the woman who had given part of the demonstration. Her name was Mai Sakahara. And we had a very short conversation. And it went something like this. Excuse me, do you teach? Yes, I do. When do you teach? Friday afternoon. Where do you teach? Pasadena. Can I take your class? Sure. And she wrote down her address and she gave it to me. That was on a Sunday. The following Friday after work, I went down that street, a dead-end street. She told me it's in her garage, so go around the house. And so I did. And there were 4 elderly Japanese women, all speaking Japanese, and then May. And all of a sudden, this 27-year-old man comes around the corner, and this was their reaction. And the expression on May's face was, oh, she did not expect me to go. But that single class fueled a passion and an interest that has lasted 37 years. And so it became really important in my life to continue that. It was always on a Friday afternoon. which meant it was a great way to end the week. So before I start, can I see how many Ikebana people are here? Okay, good. And of those Ikebana people, how many are not Ohara? Oh, where'd you guys go? Okay, so as I do the demonstration, some of the comments will be directed towards the Ohara people, some will be to those who do not know anything about Ikebana, and the rest will be for everyone. And so, brief history on Ohara. So, the founder of Ohara, Unshin Ohara, was actually a professor of Ikenobo in the late 1800s. And as Japan opened its ports, Western flowers and materials were coming into Japan, but they really couldn't be used for the stylized arrangements that were made, like Ikenobo. The flowers were too big, too bright, the stems were too short. And so Mr. Ohara designed a low bowl container and developed what we now call moribana. Literally translated is flowers piled on. Okay. He went to headquarters and he says, look, if we adopt this low bowl, we can start using all these wonderful materials that are coming from the West. And Ikenobo, being Ikenobo, said, we don't do that. And so, following a long tradition in Japan, he started his own school. And now, I think all schools have moribana. So those non-Ohara people, who are Ikebana people, does your school have moribana as one of the styles? Can I see a show of hands? Okay, great. On behalf of Ohara, you're welcome. Who knows what would happen if he hadn't developed the moribana. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a tour of the various styles of Ohara. At the end, what I hope is, one, you have a better understanding of Ohara, but more importantly, that you are inspired to continue. And if you're not studying Ikebana, perhaps you start. And perhaps on your way home, you stop off at Trader Joe's and you pick up some flowers and you go home and you just make an arrangement. There's something about the simple process of looking at material, inserting it into a vase or container. There's a sense of calm that overcomes you, as long as you're not getting ready for a dinner party. But why don't we get started? And so, if you were to come to my class on the very first day, we would do what's considered a beginner's arrangement. Let's get started. A beginner's arrangement, what we call rising form. And so, what we consider there's a beginner's arrangement because there are only two main elements, a subject and an object. The subject is fairly upright. It's a rising form. The object is sort of low. It's a focal point that brings the viewer into the arrangement, and then everything else should make the eye go up. So today I am using these beautiful delphiniums and some green hydrangeas. And so let me get started. And so students, when they're beginning and there's an exhibition and I try to convince them to participate, they will say, well, I can't participate in exhibition. Everyone's so much more advanced. You know, I've only learned the rising form. And I tell them, it's just a form. If you use the right material, it will look spectacular in an exhibition. And so, for those Ikebana people, always look at the tip of the flower. That's really what you're placing. Don't be so concerned down here, because sometimes what you're doing is you're so concerned that you're not seeing where the flower is. So, always look at the tip of the flower. Okay? So, a subject and an object. This is rising. We then have this imaginary dome where you have some freedom to place material. And so maybe I want to add a little more support to the subject. And I tell my students, Ikebana is really a meditative art form. When you have your materials in your hand, and your clippers, and your container is ready, the rest of the world should disappear. It should just be you and your materials. This is a demonstration. If I start meditating up here, the audience will disappear through the doors in the back. Question? Okay, so just to let you know, I'm quite all right answering questions during the demonstration. I have no problem with that. Kenzons. So these are needle holders, and they're weighted. The American versions are called frogs because they're green and that they sit at the bottom of a container in water. The Japanese, I think the literal translation is a mountain of needles, and they're very heavy because sometimes we're using branch materials. And then maybe I want to show a little more backward depth. Now, I tell my students to do as I say, not as I do. If it were a warm day, I'd be cutting everything underwater. If you cut material underwater, water goes up the capillaries before air. You usually get a couple more days worth of freshness from them. And there's no magic here in terms of what happens. You will see as I progress, some material will stay beautifully, some of it will know I'm doing a demonstration, and it will move. And I will think, as anyone who's given a demonstration before, the first thought that comes to your head is, funny, it worked at home. So I want to add a little more color. So I was so fortunate. You guys have an incredible flower market. Not quite as big as ours in Los Angeles. We have 2 large buildings. Each building is a block long. But the material, the branch material you guys get here far exceeds anything we can get. And I think part of that is your weather. Because it's so dry, so many of the flowering branches just don't last. And so they don't buy them. And then I got here, and I was a kid in a candy store. It was really hard to make a decision on what to buy. The other thing though, is in Los Angeles, you can buy just one bunch of materials. Here you have to buy a bundle. And so it becomes, you need like 20 students in order to use up all the materials. So I'm using these beautiful dark pink ranunculus. And I'm just trying to get the viewer's eye to go through the entire arrangement. So bringing them in and then move them all through the arrangement. So if you love these pink ranunculus, your eye's going to go here, then up, then down. Oh, and there's some back. And so one thing, when you're beginning, again, I have kenzons at the bottom of this container. And my sensei always used to say, do not try to hide the kenzons. Don't put leather leaf or don't put anything else intended to really hide it. She would say, if the arrangement is good, no one will see the kenzon. I really didn't know what that meant because I could always see the Kenzon. But being an engineer or a nerd, I tend to contemplate things. I tend to try to figure out why something works and something does not. And after many years of observing her arrangements, I realized she was drawing the viewer's eye up. So you didn't see the Kenzon because she forced your eye to all of a sudden come up. And so I tell my students the same thing. It's your job to tell the viewer where to look. And I'm also making it from behind, so you're seeing it before I am. So a very beginner's arrangement known as a rising form. Okay? And so we do this Moribana several times in several styles. And then once the Moribana is done, we then move on to a style in a tall vase that we call Heika. And so in a Heika, where in the Moribana we can use Kenzons, or I'll show you another technique, Shippos, in a tall vase, we don't have anything to stick it into. There are no Kenzons, and there are no Shippos, there's no oasis, there are no branches in there. So what we do is we learn to add crossbars and vertical stays, and we learn to brace it against the sides and the bottom of the container. Maybe 15, maybe 20 years ago, there was a movement from Japan, from the Ikebana community in Japan, to start mixing traditional Japanese material with untraditional Western materials. And part of the reason for that is Japan is also having a hard time growing the traditional materials, or having people grow it. You know, the farmers, the growers, as they aged, their kids didn't want to grow it anymore. And so they're struggling to find some of the same materials. And so this Heika, I had that in mind. So I'm using a very traditional material, this beautiful Japanese flowering quince. And I'm going to see if I can get it to stay in the container. Yeah, so I tell my students, this was the style that taught me to chill. This is really where that meditative aspect comes into play. I used to have my class Thursday evenings after work. From 6 to 9 was the class. So I was there from 6 to 9. And my sensei would give me my material. I'd get the container, put the water, try to make a tall vase without any Kenzons. And after 3 hours, I was almost in tears every single time. And I'd finally get it to stay, and she would come and she would shake the container. And everything would go down, and she would laugh, ha, and I would try to laugh to, sort of didn't want to scream or cry. But I do remember one day, one evening, it's 9:30, I'm sitting in my truck, and I say to myself, I'm really stressed. It was not a meditative day or evening. I say, Jose, something has to change. You do not need more stress in your life. So either quit or chill. And so the very next week, I decided to chill. And things just started falling into place. That didn't mean it always stayed. That just meant I wasn't stressed out about it. If it didn't stay, I would try to do it again, and then again, till eventually things started staying. Okay. Now, one of the most important things, and this is for the Ohara people, when you do a crossbar or a vertical stay, the brace must be in there firmly, attached firmly. So, I am going to use a rubber band. And some of you are aghast that I'm using a rubber band. I don't think Sogetsu is allowed to use rubber bands. Someone told me that. Ohara was not allowed to use rubber bands. And then but we always did. My sensei always said she had a lot of students who had arthritis, older women who had, and using wire or twine was next to impossible, but a rubber band worked. And then one day, our current headmaster discovered Home Depot and discovered zip ties. So I've stopped arguing about it. I'm doing what my sensei does. If it's good enough for her, if it was good enough for her, it's good enough for me. So please hold your breath while I see if this works. Okay? So now let me add another stem. And the same thing, in order to stabilize it, I'm just going to use a skewer. And in this particular arrangement, it's a free form. I don't have a subject or an object. Here, I just want to show the combination of materials and this incredible vase that belongs to a sai. Always, I hope you're still holding your breath. And as anyone who's seen my demonstrations, I really never know what I'm doing until it's done. Okay. And so here's a very traditional material, Japanese material. And here's the unconventional Western materials. These beautiful anthuriums. I've been given a lot of time, which is great. I used to almost hyperventilate because I was always running out of time. And so it's really nice to be able to calmly make these arrangements. And sometimes the back of the flower or leaf is just as beautiful. It's not always, I don't think it's easy to be my assistant, because most senseis will have their arrangements set, and I tell them I really don't know what I'm doing until I'm done. I don't really know what it looks like because I see it from behind. And I tell people, and if you've ever done arrangements from behind, you will realize sometimes you get to the front and you say to yourself, it looks better from the back. And yet, everyone's so appreciative and excited and thankful that you're doing something. So a split leaf philodendron, or in that family. And again, I'm just using these vertical stays to help stabilize the material. And so we do, I believe, and maybe this is just a little prejudice, I believe the Ohara tall vase arrangement is better than any school. We spend a lot of time, we have it part of our curriculum. And because of that, we're able to learn the techniques that allow us to then create whatever we want to create. It's the techniques that help us generate and create and stabilize the materials so that hopefully nothing collapses and no one laughs, ha, 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 which will make me laugh, ha, ha, ha. So a Heika arrangement, okay? And I always tell people, because we see it from behind, because I create it from behind, or other senseis, I think Sogetsu does the same thing, creates it from behind, you really don't know what it looks like until you go into the front. And so it would be nice if audiences would give the arranger some time to actually go in the front and readjust, because I may look at it and think, oh, ooh, ooh. Can I have that last philodendron leaf, please? Okay. But it's good enough. And after we do Heika, we then go back. So we started low, we went high, and we're coming back low. And this is a progression in the class, where you start with the beginners. As you get more advanced, you get more advanced techniques, and then we come back to low bowl, but this time, we're going to use a lot more materials. And we call it a multi-variety moribana. And so, going to the market, was it yesterday? I kind of lose track of time. I started in South Carolina giving workshops. I then went to Naples, Florida to give a demonstration and workshop, and then came up here to give workshops and a demonstration. And if you haven't retired yet, but you do, you're going to discover that you kind of forget what day of the week it is unless you have a set schedule. Like I said, I was a software engineer. I thought I had an incredible memory. I could always remember things that were happening a month in advance. And then I retired and I realized I was no longer in front of my computer. So every day at work, I'd be in front of my computer and I would check my calendar. And I could see my schedule. So I just assumed it was me that had a good memory. No, it was my computer. And I just happened to always be looking at it. So when I retired, I thought senility was setting in immediately because I couldn't remember things. So I'm constantly asking people, what day of the week is this? Okay, so let's see what we have here. So fritillaria, I don't know if you guys ever use it. If you are an Ikebana person and you travel and you do demonstrations, you're going to be able to get material that you'll never be able to use at home because someone else is paying for it. And if you teach, you know what I mean, right? We would never give this to students unless it was at a special exhibition. And so I'm just looking at this stem, and I'm trying to figure out which one's the best. There are a lot of leaves on this, so I'm going to remove some. And this is where I tell my students, this is what makes Ikebana different. Because you want to look at each stem, and you want each stem to look its best. Because you want the overall arrangement to look good. And if one stem doesn't look good, the overall arrangement may look good, but it won't look great. And so there's always this sense of looking and trying to find the best position, the best angle for each stem. And so I'm going to do sort of a transition of color. I'm going from this green, and I'm going to move eventually to, I think, an orange. We'll see. And I'm using Kenzons. I have a lot of pin holders here. Oh. It knows I'm giving a demo. Okay, thank you. It's also great to have an incredible assistant who's also an instructor. And because she knows what can happen, so she has things already prepped for me. I encourage people, if you're studying and you really want to learn, go beyond what you're learning in class. Volunteer to help your sensei or II organization. If there's a demonstration, volunteer to carry buckets. I did. Volunteer to go with them to the market to see how they, and just carry the flowers, because what you'll learn is how things are done, what to do when things don't go right. So Debbie mentioned she saw me in Dallas, and that was an incredible learning experience for me. I had been invited to give the Ohara demonstration for the conference. And maybe a year and a half in advance, we had a lot of communications via email. I sent her a list of everything I needed to do a workshop and a demonstration. And for whatever reason, I'm not blaming anyone, none of it came. There was nothing. And so the motto, friendship through flowers, suddenly meant something to me. Because as I saw people throwing things in the trash, I would run up to them, can I use that? And they're like, sure. And once they heard that I didn't have material, they were coming up to me and saying, I need the hydrangea, please. They were coming up to me and saying, can you use this? I'm not using it. Can you, they would go into the trash and look for stuff. And it was so warming and welcoming, and it just made me realize this is why I do this. It's the people you meet at these events that really make Ikebana more than just flowers in a container. So I'm using some more of this green hydrangea. Okay. And then yellow fritillaria. And this is typically, once you go on from the Heika, we typically begin with 2 materials. And then we move on to 3 materials. after you do Heika. Our current headmaster is emphasizing the sense of multi-variety, more than just 3. Can we still use the same techniques of creating negative space so that not everything is crowded? It should not feel crowded. We always say in Ikebana, you should feel the breeze through your arrangement. You should be able to stand and just inhale and not feel like anything is being crowded. You shouldn't feel claustrophobic when you're looking at the arrangement. And that all comes from making sure you have things high, you have things some low, there's space. There is the sense of movement. Again, if you love this yellow fritillaria, I am going to force you to go through the entire arrangement. Your eye will go down here, it will come up, and then I can tell you, it will see this one in the back. And so now, and then we still have the leaves, those alocasia. Okay. So now I'm going to go a little softer on the yellow with the solidago. And you see, I'm not, nothing up my sleeves. It's nothing, I tell my students, it's not brain surgery. No one will die if you make a mistake. So students, be willing to make mistakes. It's through those mistakes that you learn. If you make a mistake, now I tell my students, you're right, you cut it too short. So now what are you going to do so that when you're done with the overall arrangement, it won't look like that's too short? Does that mean you pull it back or push it forward? You put something taller next to it? Whatever it is, you need to not freak out. Like I say, no one will die if you make a mistake. I had just told that I was in Victoria giving a demonstration for their 30th anniversary of something. I think the group's founding. And I was making in a tall vase with a very large branch. The audience was maybe 6 feet from the stage, and there was a woman front and center with her walker standing there. And I insert the branch into the vase. I step back, waiting to hear the applause, really. But I step back, and the branch slipped into the container. I looked down, and she did this. And it was the first time I thought, maybe someone will die if I make a mistake. It hasn't happened. I don't foresee it happening, but it was thinking I need to come up with another saying because no one will die, but they may get injured. And you will notice if you've ever seen another Ikebana demonstrator, especially if they're from Japan, I'm a lot more relaxed. Part of that is I'm from California. And so it's in our nature to just chill on things. And I started giving workshops in North Carolina to the southeastern chapter of Ohara, I think in 2006. And maybe after the second or third trip giving workshops, so 2 or 3 years later, one of the women came up to me and in a wonderful Southern accent said, "We love your casual approach to teaching." And is that a compliment? I thought to myself, am I not teaching properly? And then I realized it was a compliment. That so many times in class, people are stressed. They want to do it perfectly. They want to make their sensei proud. And so they're stressed. I tell people it has to be enjoyable. You have to come out of the class feeling better than you did going in. And so I now am known as the guy who has a casual approach to teaching. And last year I was in DC giving workshops, and a woman I had never met came up to me after the first session, and she glared at me. "What's different about you?" Excuse me? "What's different about you?" "I don't know, I'm from California." She says, "Why am I not stressed yet?" And that was a serious, what is it? And I hear that a lot. And I understand, because when I was in class, I just wanted it to be perfect, and it better be perfect, because I want my sensei to say, "Good boy, good boy." But that's not me. I want people to actually, I'm hoping they're learning something. I'm hoping they leave the class feeling better. But most importantly, I hope they leave the class thinking, I can do this. And I need to continue to do this. Okay? So I just want to add a little bit more warmth. And so I'm adding this alocasia. One thing about Ikebana that you should do if you're studying is learn to use both hands. One, it's a good mental exercise, right? Using both hands. But two, I really cannot get my right hand to place this where I want it. And so I have to use my left hand. So where I could turn these around to show people, this one I cannot. So let's see what I can. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 material, multi-variety moribana. So, I used to be them about to carry away an arrangement, and it's one of the scariest things you can do because I didn't make it so it could stay firmly. I just made it so while I'm doing it, it looks good. And then things happen, and they're really heavy, and things move, and then I blame it on them if it doesn't look good. Great. Okay? So, in Chinese history, there was a period where the intellectuals, the literati, would come together and they would gather objects, flowers, bronzes, calligraphy brushes, the ink stones, and they would paint them. And it was known as bunjin, or educated man. And there was nothing necessarily that connected everything, except each item had a strong character. And so our third headmaster, Ohara, took that concept. He loved those paintings. He loved the idea of combining things, each thing having a strong character. It's a really difficult style to teach and to learn. So the first time I did it, my sensei said, well, there's a Japanese saying. I won't tell you all of it, but the last line was, and yet the eggplant and the pumpkin are good friends. So I'm sure your thought was the same as mine. Something is lost in the translation. But I tried to channel my inner eggplant, and I made the arrangement, And of course, she changed it completely. But being who I am, an engineer, I contemplated that. What does she mean, eggplant and pumpkin being friends? How can that help me make a better arrangement? And then I visualized an eggplant and a pumpkin together. And the moment you do that, the purple of the eggplant just stands out, as does the orange of the pumpkin. The smoothness of the eggplant stands out just as much as the roughness of the pumpkin. And then I thought more, and we all have friends that when we're with them, you can be yourself, and they can be themselves, and one doesn't dominate the other, but you complement yourselves, right? We all have friends like that. And so I thought, oh, okay, I need to make sure that when I try to create this, one doesn't dominate the other. And so let me grab this. So let's take a look. Again, kid in the candy store trying to figure out how to do this, how to use this. And you have to learn to dodge when you're working with a demonstrator. And again, it was a magnolia that almost killed that woman. Okay, so I think that's good. Okay, so. So my sensei was a petite woman. You know, she was very unassuming, very elegant, but very unassuming, and yet put a pair of clippers in her hands, and she was an incredible force. Hold your breath. Here we go. Okay. Okay. So the character of this Chinese magnolia, Magnolia solangiana, I want to impress you with the name, is not only the flowers, but the wonderful branch structure. And so I want to make sure whatever I put in here doesn't detract from that.
Sensei, we have a question here.
Yes.
Would you mind talking a little bit about the angles you're thinking about and the heights you're thinking about?
Okay, so one, it's a demonstration, and so you got to go bigger, right? For the people in C section up there, you just have to go bigger. Two, there's this really interesting thing that happens when things look slightly off balance. This tension that, is that going to tip over? So that grabs your attention. The fact that it isn't dense tells me I can go taller. These branches are relatively thin. If they were thicker, I'd probably bring it down, because then I think the overall balance would not be right. So angles, I do this. I try to see how can I best show this particular branch. And in this case, I think leaning back gives you incredible movement. And so that's sort of how I came up with this position for this stem. Does that help?
Not really.
Oh. Oh, yeah. So let me tell you what I learned, right? Physics degree with a minor in math. Okay, I knew if the angle said 45 degrees, or you want it 60, or you only need it 30, I knew exactly how it was. I knew exactly what the angle should be. And so I would make technically correct arrangements that had no life, because each stem is different. If I had the perfect stem, then 45 degrees might be the right angle. But if I don't have the perfect stem, and I never do, it may be 50 or 30 or 90. And so what becomes important is not any single stem, but when you're done, does the overall arrangement feel balanced? And I use the word feel. Does the arrangement feel right? And so it was my Ikenobu sensei who started using the word feel. I remember she was correcting one of my arrangements, and she sat in front of it, and she says, "You need to feel the depth in your arrangement." Again, maybe a language problem. I can see the depth, but what do you mean feel the depth? I didn't say that to her, but I was standing behind her, and she changed a single leaf. All of a sudden, I didn't know I had been holding my breath, but I was able to breathe. I could feel the depth. So it's not always technical. It has to feel right. It's not about a single stem. Because I tell my students, you know, if it's just about this flower, put it in a bud vase and go home. It's about the entire arrangement. So when you're working, you have to consider what else is coming up. And I don't know if that helped anymore. Yeah, but that's sort of how I discovered that just because there are specified angles doesn't mean every stem will have to be at that angle. Okay, I'm not going to ask you if that answered your question again, but I'm hoping it gives you an idea that this is art. Yeah. Balance. So there's water in here, okay? But I can tell if this were top heavy, that would be a different, but it's through experience of feeling how, you know, the branch is coming up to here. So there's some force here and some force here, but it's balanced in a way, famous last words, that things will stay in place. That, and I know Asai will come running to grab the vase if she notices, no, seriously, and that is a sign of a good assistant and a good instructor, because she knows what's going to happen. Run up here and do it in case. Okay. Yep. So, again, I'm trying to show the character of this. And it may be that when I'm done, some of you may say, well, I noticed the branch more than I noticed anything else, or I noticed the flowers. And that's okay. I always say, Jimmy cracked corn. And all of you my age and older know what that means. The younger group, there used to be a song that we used to sing, right? Jimmy cracked corn and I don't care. And I don't mean I don't care. I mean, for me, it's not that important. So I use that a lot, and I always tell people, don't be offended. I'm not trying to tell you, anything other than it's not important to me. Okay. So, again, the character of the Oriental lily is the beautiful lily. So, let's see what I have here. And in Ikebana, we like the idea of your arrangement changing. We don't typically want everything to be fully open. That sense that the arrangement is alive, that it will continue to grow and change, is important. The idea that the various stages of life is important, even to the flowers, is a really important idea in Ikebana. If this were autumn, I would have damaged leaves because that gives me a sense of the season. I would not want them in the spring. So I need to brace this. Again, all the same techniques. So when you come up, please watch those branches that you don't trip. Okay. Okay. So that's okay for now. Now the final thing is this incredible oncidium. I've never seen it this color. It's a beautiful yellow-orange. Again, the idea of using very traditional Western materials along with non-traditional, more Western style, Western material still plays well here. And it gives it a wonderful sense of color. Here or here? Here? Okay, this is on you. Okay. So, channeling my inner eggplant, a bunjin arrangement. Okay? And one thing is, when making bunjin arrangements, the container is really important. It must have a Chinese-inspired glaze or look and feel. So we don't want shibui here, right? We don't want wabi-sabi here. Here it's Chinese in all its glory, highly glazed, beautiful container. I put it on the stand, but I never like to put it on the stand because it just makes me feel like it's going to fall. Okay. So, our third headmaster who developed the bunjin style also developed another style that derives its style from Japanese paintings. Those paintings are now called rinpa. And the rinpa painters, some of the most famous in the 1800s, 18th century, so 1700s, they came from families of kimono painters or fan painters. And if you've ever seen a kimono with flowers, all the flowers are fully open. There's nothing subtle about those particular kimonos. They're very two-dimensional. If you see a rinpa painting on the screen, very two-dimensional. One of the most famous is the rabbit ear irises, and it's just the rabbit ear irises, and then they go up hillsides. I don't know if you've ever seen that. And these rinpa painters emphasizes the decorative aspects of the material. Now, there are rinpa paintings that have nothing to do with flowers or trees, but the majority really emphasize the flowers. And you'll see them on scrolls, you'll see them on screens, you'll see it on fans. And again, typically all the flowers are fully open. It's very two-dimensional. There's not much a sense of depth. And you don't necessarily put the materials in how they naturally grow. You need to figure out what's the most decorative aspect of this material. So I've seen, where you have hosta leaves standing straight up. Okay? Well, that's not how they naturally grow, but if you want to see the beauty of hosta leaves, just show the leaf itself, right? The shape, the color, the variation on color. And as I was going through the flower market day before, I thought of a famous screen by one of the famous painters, Kori. And it's in a museum in the Moa Museum in Atami. And it's called Red and White Ume, or Red and White Japanese Flowering Apricot. And it shows a red ume on one side of the river and a white ume on the other side of the river, and then, or a stream, and then the stream in between them. And so when I saw that, when I saw this material, this pink cherry and the white cherry, that folding screen came to mind. Okay? So the only thing associated with that screen is that idea in my head. The material's not ume, it's cherry. And if you look at those screens, it's really just the trees. Okay? So in this case, I am using a sheep bow, right? It's a weighted ring, and you get things to stay by inserting it into one of the openings. Okay. I hope you're still holding your breath. Okay. And I'm trying to have as many fully open flowers as I can. Because in this case, it's sort of for the glory of the beautiful flowers. I have a clock right here. I'm notorious for going over time. I tell this story. I was giving another demonstration many years ago in Los Angeles, and there were, I don't know, 300 people in the crowd, and it was the theme of the demonstration was East Meets West. Bring the peonies, please. East Meets West. So there was a Western designer, and there was me representing the East. And they said, the whole program is 90 minutes. Each of you gets 45 minutes. So East, go up. And so I'm doing it. I'm making my arrangements. I've taken maybe 20 minutes. And then I hear from the back of the room, the woman in charge, are you almost done? I then look at the clock, and instead of 45 minutes, I had taken an hour and 15 minutes. I panicked, and I just started to finish the last arrangement. Luckily, the Western designer had already made her arrangement, her stage. She just had to reassemble it, put it on stage. And so she really only needed 10 minutes. That's what it took her. So I figured I was helping the audience because there was going to be a lot of dead time. But that said, I always have a clock now, and I ask my assistant to keep me honest. And so these are beautiful peonies. And again, fully open. For the Ohara people, there was this, for many years, well, until maybe last year, we were taught there are two forms. One's circular, one's fan shape. You must use material that you only see in Rimpa paintings, or material that looks like something you would see in a Rimpa painting. So, you could never use, say, agapanthus, because you would never see agapanthus in a Rimpa painting. You would only use hydrangeas and Japanese irises. And then last year, do you have some more red? Last year, that changed. And part of that is, like I said, Japan is having a hard time with the growers. Their families are no longer growing some of the traditional materials. And so they're looking now, and I think it's a good idea. Our current headmaster is saying, well, if those Rimpa painters lived now, what would they do? What would they use? Well, they would paint sunflowers and agapanthus and anything else that they have available. Okay, we're going to go to this side. So that's, and I'll work on that some more, but this is now the other side of the river. Right. Okay, more peonies and the hydrangeas. Oh, okay. Prunus is one of those, and prunus are the cherries, peach, nectarines. It's a branch that will crack but won't break if you're gentle. Please be gentle. All you need is like a quarter of the bark to be intact, and enough water will go up the stem to help that branch stay alive and continue to bloom. Hey, hydrangeas, please. Leave those there. And so typically, we have oh, okay. Do you see that little? I'm notorious for losing my clippers. And so I have a little, oh, there they are. I have a little code, hand signals. If ever you take a workshop and I come up and I do this to your arrangement, that means you have things that are same length. Cut one shorter. If I do this, that means you created a plane, right? So move one forward, move one back. If I do this, I've lost my clippers. And you need, and people laugh, but ask them. You will hear me always doing this. Okay, so. When I'm making arrangements or planning for a demonstration, I'm never sure what material I'm going to use. Oops. But one thing I always try to do is use a material that my mom loved. So growing up, she loved hydrangeas. So in most of my arrangements, she loved hydrangeas, she loved bird of paradise, and roses. And so in my demonstrations, I will always have, I will try to use. See how fast I lose these things? Oh, this is mine. Okay. At least I know one material I'm going to use. And it reminds me of my mom. So when you're planning a demonstration, if you can come up with something like that, something that will make it easy, because that's one less thing I have to worry about. I know I'm going to use either bird of paradise, hydrangea, or a rose. Okay. The other thing is, in the Rimpa paintings, they emphasize the material in two ways. They exaggerated the flowers by making them open and flat, and then they abbreviated or eliminated as much as possible. So you don't see the entire flower stem. You just see the heads. You don't see the hydrangea plant. You just see the flower head. And so it's through that exaggeration and elimination of things that creates the decorative aspect of the Rimpa painting. And so what I'm just trying to do is help connect a little bit of one group, one side of the river to the other. And part of that is by using the same material in one place as in the other. So the peach-colored peonies. And then a lot of the screens and paintings will have gold leaf as part of it. So sort of to mimic that or to give you that sense, I like to use Solidago. Because the color, to me, pops like the gold leaf in the screens and paintings. And it also helps your eye move from one side to the other. So keeping me honest, Asai-san, how much time do I actually have left? Okay. And there's no specific form here. You know, there's no main stem or secondary stem. There's just the entire painting or the entire screen. Hopefully two-dimensional, hopefully decorative. And I think I'm going to stop there. Again, I may, when I go to the front, rearrange things, move things over. But this is a style where you have a lot of density, so you can see the glory of the flowers. You'll have some empty space. And I'm hoping they come together sort of in this area. So my version of a Rimpa painting, a Rimpa-inspired painting. And so when I go in front, I may count and say, ooh, I used 4 flowers. But in the last couple of years, our headmaster has said, don't stress it. Sometimes 3 is not enough, and 5 is too many. And so if you put in 4, unless you have an accountant in the audience, no one will notice, right? Or a mathematician. And that made it really easier for us because we either had to leave the arrangement feeling a little empty or a little too crowded. Because sometimes you just need a little bit more. And so when our first headmaster created the Ikebana style, he realized he could bring part of nature into his home. So he started creating a style which we now call landscape. And I'm not trying to create an exact replica of what you see in nature. I'm trying to create the feeling you have when you're out in nature. We've all been out in the woods on a wonderful spring day. I mean, you can almost smell the air right now. When you think of it, you just have that wonderful, I'm alive, this is great. Or have you ever been by a pond in the south on a hot summer day? You can feel yourself sweating, feel yourself a little uncomfortable, expecting to slap a mosquito. It's that feeling that I'm trying to create with this arrangement. Because this is all make-believe. I don't know what's blooming here. Okay? And a lot of what we get at the flower market doesn't bloom here or in LA. But I know what it feels like to be out in the woods or by a pond or in a meadow. And so what I'm going to try to create today is that feeling that you're at the edge of the woods. And you're walking and you look down and this is what you see. So in Ohara, our landscapes have been categorized into 3 categories. A far view, so you're at one edge of the lake, one side of the lake, and you're looking across, and what you see are just the forest. And maybe color at the base, some flowers blooming, but you really can't tell because you're across the lake. That's a far view. The second is a middle view. So you're across the street. And what you see are the bushes, predominantly, and then some flowers growing around the bushes or through the bushes. And then near view, which means you're right there, and you're walking, you stop, and you look down. So, in my mind, you're about to enter the woods, and you pause, and you look down, and maybe this is what you see. And so here I'm going to use both the shippo and the kenzans. And so we're entering the woods. Maybe this is the sunnier side where you're coming in. So things are more open. And maybe you come up to a tree that's fallen or decayed, or maybe it's just a large branch that's fallen. And so as a kid, I remember going to, I grew up in LA, and I remember going up to the woods, or near Malibu, there are some woods across from Malibu, which is, on the ocean. And I used to love to go there because the sun would trickle down through the leaves, and you would have all this spots of sunlight. And so I remember coming up, and there would be a little stream. And by little stream, I mean just a little run, maybe 2 feet wide, some water trickling down. And there would be a log that was, or a tree that had fallen over. And of course, I could have just stepped over on the other side of the log. But I would climb that log, walk the log, try not to fall into the little stream. And so when I see these driftwoods or dried, that's the memory I have. And it's a really fun memory. And so I like to use them. Because if you were like me and you got to go every once in a while, got to go out into the woods, it was a great time. You know, we also used to barbecue. Oh, this is one thing about me. I'll tell stories that have nothing to do with Ikebana. But these things bring back those memories. And that, I think, is incredible about art. So when I first saw a realistic landscape, there was a single maple leaf. I don't remember the entire arrangement, but I remember a single maple leaf floating in the water. And the moment I saw that, it took me back to a garden I had seen maybe 3 or 4 years before in another country. I happened to be in England, youth hustling. And again, that same thought is, I need to learn to do that. I need to learn to create an arrangement that takes someone from where they are to somewhere they've been. And so it was after that that I started studying Ohara. And so it's a wonderful way for me to remember parts of my childhood. In recreating some of these scenes. And in the Los Angeles area, you know, we don't have daffodils growing everywhere, unless it's in your garden. So I may not see that in LA, but I remember seeing other flowers. I didn't know what they were. I remember seeing branches of trees and bushes that I didn't know what they were. And so that doesn't mean I can't recreate that feeling. And so my sensei was an incredible landscape arranger. And this was another time that it's a hard style to teach. And she would give me the material. I'd make the arrangement. She'd sit down in front of it, and she would say, "Oh, how cute. It looks like it belongs in Barbie's dollhouse." And again, she would laugh, ha, and I would laugh, ha, and I would then just watch her create an incredible scene of nature that would never fit in Barbie's dollhouse. And so I didn't know how she did it, so I just had to watch her. There's this sense in Japan that you have to steal the knowledge. Everything will be given to you. You have to look and figure out what's going on. And I'm a visual learner, so that's okay with me. And so I watched. And what I realized was where I was trying to create movements by manipulating material, she was finding the movement in the branch itself. And she was trimming it so that movement came out. And it was a hard thing for me to finally be able to do, but it was a good goal for me to try and mimic that. And so part of what I'm doing is I'm pulling things out, but then putting things in. So again, it's creating this up and down, high and low, drawing your eye in. And if you go out into nature and you look at a bush, you think it's completely dense. Let's get that. You think it's completely dense, but if you look, you can actually see through most of the bushes, and you'll see the ground, and you'll see spots of light in the ground, so that it's not too dense. And so this is a fiddlehead fern, okay? And again, maybe this doesn't grow in LA. It doesn't. But maybe you guys have seen it on your walks through the woods. And again, if you like that fiddle leaf, I'm going to force you to not only go there, but to come here. So there's always this sense that things just don't grow in one place. Maybe there's a root that's spreading, and it's growing more. And if you've ever grown bamboo in your yard, you know what I'm talking about. It's the most pernicious thing. And while I grow some in a pot, I'm always looking for people who grow it in the ground, and then I want to become their friend so that I can help them when I need it. I used to tell people, if you have a beautiful yard, I will be your best friend. Okay. And so, again, as we were working yesterday, just trying to figure out what I was going to do, I was like, well, maybe I'll add some daffodils, and I realized for me, well, let me tell you a story of the first time I went to Japan to study. It was Ikenobo. And the word that was used the most for my arrangements when someone, Japanese women, would look at it was kirei. Ah, kirei. Ah, how pretty. Kirei, 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 kirei. I didn't want kirei. I wanted omoshiroi, interesting. I wanted sugoi, wow. Subarashi, wow, incredible. And so I go, and I'm at headquarters making an arrangement, and I made a freestyle, and there's this beautiful loop and line coming out, and the professor gets to my arrangement, and there's an interpreter there, and the first thing she says is, ah, kirei. And so I looked at her, and I said, through the interpreter, kirei, 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 kirei. I always get kirei. How can I get omoshiroi? How can I get sugoi? And she said, your lines are delicate. And maybe that's part of your personality. And that's okay. So, okay, I'm a delicate kind of guy. I'm okay with that. And she said, so don't be concerned if your arrangements are delicate, because that's your nature. Now, if you want to go to omoshiroi, and then she gave me 2 or 3 things to do. And that was a great lesson, because I needed to accept my personality, my persona, as being slightly delicate, and that there's nothing wrong with that. But if I wanted to do something more, then I had to consciously change things. And I did. So I'm still a delicate kind of guy, but when I want to do omoshiroi, when I want to get sugoi, I think of my sensei. And I would say, oh, I would pick this beautiful line if it were me, but I want something more. What would sensei pick? She would pick this branch. Okay, let's go with this branch. And it's a good lesson because we all have different personalities. At a certain point, your personality comes out in your arrangement, if you're lucky, if you allow it. If you allow yourself to be yourself when you're making your arrangement, your personality will shine in the arrangement, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want more, that's okay too. You just have to figure out what it is that will get you there. And sometimes asking your sensei will work, and sometimes just contemplating things. I tell my students, I never asked my sensei questions. I never did. And she gave some answers, as she was explaining things, but I think some things are just you do it so often that it's second nature, and you don't realize you're doing it. So if someone asks you, why'd you put it there? Well, it looks good, right? In the back of her head, she may have spent years doing something to finally have it become second nature to put things in a certain place. So don't always ask your teacher for the answers, okay? Think about it. Try to figure it out on your own. Why is it that when I put that there, it didn't look good, but sensei just moved a single leaf, and all of a sudden it feels right? Contemplate it. Think about it. It's art. There isn't always one right answer. I tell people with most arts, there are things that really move me. Things I really don't necessarily care for, but I can appreciate the work and the concept behind it. And then there's things that I just think are horrible. And that's okay. It's art. And so be okay with sometimes doing things that other people might think it's just, it's all right, I would never do that. Or, wow, sugoi. Or, what a piece of trash. No, hopefully no one says that. Okay, let's get the Ming fern, please. Okay, so, in the woods, as you get closer to the woods or deeper in, you're going to start seeing ferns. The ferns don't grow too well in the sun. And so, again, things are growing together. And the headmaster, when he started creating, the first headmaster started creating this landscape arrangement, he realized that the ground cover was what really made it look like a landscape. And so we do add things to cover up the ground. We're not covering up the water. We're not really covering up the water. What we're doing is mimicking that feeling of you're walking on something, moss, dirt, branches, ferns, whatever. Okay, and so in Japan, they use a lot of club moss, which is a certain type of I don't know what it is, but it grows on the ground. And, it doesn't grow in California. And so what I tend to use is this a Ming fern, Asparagus rectrofractus. It just, to me, looks, when you place it in the container, looks like it could be a ground cover. And so, from your view, all you may see is the green. And if it were summer, I may show more water, just for that sense of coolness. Because it's early spring, I will show some water, but not a lot. So as the weather gets warmer, we want the viewer to have a cool feeling, so we will show more water. As the weather gets colder, we don't want the viewer to feel too cold, so we will show less water. And what it is forcing the arranger to think about the season. And I could go all day putting this in, but I'm going to put a little bit more. And as I come close to the end, you don't need a village to do these demonstrations. It would help, but you really do need some passionate dedicated students and people. And so before I end, let me just thank the people behind the scenes. One, Asaya-san, who teaches classes Thursday night, so it's a great way to end the workday. I'm just throwing that out. But also, Joseph, if you could come out. And Marjorie. These are people who are willing to give up their evenings and their weekends to help a complete stranger play with flowers. And I think I'll end that there. Why don't we take this away? And finally, I hope, I hope you've learned something. I hope that you understand Ohara Ikebana a little bit better. You can see where you start and where you end up. I want to thank the New York chapter for inviting me. That I remember that demo in Dallas. I'll never forget it. You were so kind to remember it and remind me of it. And I want to thank the audience for allowing me to share my passion with you. Thank you so much. ありがとうございました。